All right, we're recording. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So to people who don't know, I met actually, yeah, to people who don't know, I met you through Kylie.
Yes, we do. We have some mutual industry friends.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty enthusiastic podcast nut. So I love meeting new to me industry podcasts.
And I have to be honest with you, the moment you emailed me and there's like a photo on your email and I'm like, oh my gosh, her hair looks so good. I
Oh
could
my God.
actually I could already relate to you
This
because you
is
have the same.
this is already my favorite podcast I've ever been on. So, and it's only been 30 seconds. No,
Oh
thanks.
no.
Let me just encourage to the crowd. We're here to talk about PR. But listen, if you're going great, just own it. I think you and I both are good examples of people who said, we're just going to do it.
Yeah, it's perfect too. I don't know if you get this a lot, but you also have a very young face. So people always ask me, like they always ask me, "Hey, do you color your hair?" I'm like, "No, I don't color my hair." It's
Yes. And so
natural.
what I did is I don't spend as much in coloring now, but now I spend more in my skin just so like once a year someone will still try and card me. That just makes me feel better about myself. So
Oh, my skin is hopeless. So good for you for taking care of your skin. Okay, so before we start, I would love it if you would tell the listeners and the viewers something about yourself that they probably don't know about you.
People would be surprised, about me. Oh, okay. I think I go between two things. One is for those who do know me, and I think the nature of my business, it's very type A. It's very organized. I come from events. That's not a surprise that I'm very, very uptight and type A. I've got my Yankee background. Most people would be shocked that my sock drawer is a disaster. My clothing drawers are a complete disaster. So if you see someone where I hit every deadline, I get the things in early, we're on top of it. But if you came into my house, I'd like to think is pretty sparkling, and you went up to my room, it would be like bombs of clothes going off when you open my drawers. People are very surprised about that. And I would also say they'd be surprised that I have tattoos, but the tattoos, only two, but it makes it seem like I have more, but I don't.
So we also have like a guest bedroom, and that's where I dump all my clothes
Oh yeah.
whenever
No
we
one
have
needs to see
laundry.
that. Yeah, I know.
My wife folds it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put it in the cabinet, but I just put it on top of the bed, and it's just like an
Someday.
explosion of a hurricane of clothing there. So I completely. We can't be perfect, right? So
No,
there
we
has to
can't.
be
We
something
all
wrong
need
about us.
exactly. We need something, and for me, that's my something. And I'm lucky that I found a husband who is okay. He thinks it's hilarious because he's like, if only people knew this about you, with how you have this reputation.
That's cool. So I would now I want to know what's your origin story, like how you got into the industry and what you're up to
Sure.
right now.
Well, I'm up to all sorts of things. So my background actually is in events. And so I love to start there with most people I'm talking to. Not everybody realizes. So I went to school for PR. That's a longer story, but we'll say for another time. But decided to go into events. I really had a pull towards that when I got out of school. I did a year of AmeriCorps. So I actually did a year of community service in the US in Virginia. I worked in the inner city schools. And in the meantime, I worked part-time at a historic venue. And I really felt a pull to do I wanted to work in AmeriCorps, but I really love the event industry from the outside perspective. And so went ahead and did that, fell in love. And it was backbreaking work. I worked at a nonprofit. I worked nights and weekends. I did God, there were times and we would do volumes. So it was tons of events on the weekends. And so I did that for a bunch of years, but always felt that pull to go back to PR. And so over time it evolved, and I thought to myself, well, I need to combine these two. And I have the insider insight, having done almost 1,000 events, corporate, social, weddings. And now I can take all of these great PR principles. And I had stayed on top of that by I was like PR chair of a local wedding association, things like that, and to join forces. I can tell you that it was a bit of a weird slippery road because it happened a couple years earlier than expected. I accepted a job as director of caterer at a local place, and the plan was to be there for a few years. It was really, I'll be honest, it was great money. I would have been easily, if not the highest paid director of catering. And I was like 26, 27, in town. I negotiated it and I ended up staying 3 weeks. It was a horrible fit. That's the most polite way I could put it. And made the decision to start in the middle of the recession. I was literally recession, just bought a house, about to pay for a wedding. And I'm like, why not start the company early with a little bit of support from friends who thought that, and family who thought that was a good idea. And so since then, we've been doing it for 10 years. And these days we keep really busy, couple different ways. We have a membership program where we work with wedding pros globally who serve as experts for all these great press inquiries. And then on the other side, we do retainer work, which basically means, we basically get in their business with them and we help create them as thought leaders. So I do a lot of speaking too. So we talked about Wedding MBA. I'll be there. And I just got back and I'm heading to NACE Experience next. So I really enjoy talking about PR on the road and hopefully helping empower people to represent themselves, because it truly is not brain surgery. At the end of the day, there's a lot of value to what I do. I'm not trying to discount that, but there's a lot that can be done internally before you bring in a publicist. So I go on the road and really talk about that.
Just so you know, whenever I hear PR or a wedding business has a PR company, it always is next level to me. Immediately it elevates their brand.
Sure.
Right? So
yeah, people say that. I had one of my clients is a good friend of mine. I called her and she jokingly said, I feel so cool taking this phone call from my publicist while I'm grocery shopping. So it's just kind of
yeah, so that's the thing, like it always, I kind of feel like a movie star or like a very important person whenever I have a publicist, because you're trying to organize not just your company but also your image.
Correct. And really, I'm sure it's partly optics as well. I mean, but if you think about it, the people who bring on a publicist are the ones who tend to be leveling up their companies, and they're at a point where they're pretty satisfied where they are from a growth standpoint. Doesn't mean they've stopped growing it. They could continue on, but sales is not their number one focus because it's a well-oiled machine. And then from there, they're bringing in someone to help elevate what they're doing. So there is, I'm sure, optics to it that gets people going, ooh, what is this? So.
Yeah, it's really intimidating. That's why I'm like, when you said that we could talk about my business and the PR, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is perfect.
Oh, good.
So just so to people who don't know what having a PR firm means, do you mind explaining it to them?
Sure. So a publicist, basically, it's so funny. You ask this, and I have to tell you, I had a really hard time explaining it for a long time. I mean, if you're in the biz, you know what PR means, but to the outside world, it's like, well, what are you doing for me? And luckily it was my hardest speaking engagement to date. I spoke to 90 kindergartners. My son was in kindergarten. I applied to do career day, and I had to really create a basic understanding of what it is that I do. And I said, and now I use it all the time, I see the best in my clients who are wedding pros, and I make sure everybody knows about it. So when you have a publicist, it's going to be that image. It's going to be making sure you're getting published potentially for real weddings. You could be published for being quoted in things as an expert. You could be an award winner. It could be speaking. It could be podcast interviews, and just making sure that everyone knows how great you are, basically, and really leveraging your expertise and seeing what the potential in your story is to get it out to the right audience.
Okay. Wow, that's your elevator pitch. That's amazing.
Yeah, I did not mean for it to be, but yeah, that sounded good, didn't it?
It's so easy to understand. If you could explain it to kindergartners, you could explain it to everyone.
I feel like I nailed it finally once I had to speak to 6-year-olds in mass, and I was like, oh, I'm actually going to keep that and use that from now on.
Yeah, it's having. So would you say that majority of people online who have like a push with their branding, would you say how much percentage would you say that people have a PR firm, like wedding people, at least wedding people?
That would be really tough. I don't have the numbers on it. If I could make an observation, kind of a guess with that, oh, that's tough, because we're talking about someone who has an offsite publicist, right? But then you have some people that are big enough to have in-house publicity teams, like the Colin Cowies of the world have full-time employees for that sort of
Gotcha.
thing. But then you've got, others who bring in somebody versus those representing themselves. If I could hedge my bets and know that this is strictly a guess at this, it's an educated guess, I would say probably about half-ish of the people out there who
Half-ish.
really are
Okay.
just everywhere. They either have a publicist or they could even have a public relations intern for, they could have internal marketing. I would say half, maybe a little bit under that, but a lot of those guys are getting help. And the ones that aren't, to their credit, they have the right relationships for their own reasons, whether they've prioritized that over other things. There are some people who attend certain conferences and get in with the right people. I mean, it just really depends.
Okay. That's cool. I love that because when I did networking last night, I went to like this. Usually I go to wedding networking events, but
Okay.
this one in particular we went to, and it's like a socialite mixer, which
Oh.
is more of like other businesses. And I
Mhm.
got so intimidated because I'm like, holy crap, these people are just rolling in with Lamborghinis and they're just like bigger people. So, I feel like you can only do so much by yourself when you're trying to get yourself out there. Is that true?
Well, I would say there are some people who have represented themselves and done very well at it. I would say there, and those are outliers. For the majority, I'd almost want to say there's only so much time you can put into it, because the more you put into marketing and PR for yourself, the more time it takes away from actually doing your craft. Unless you're willing to maybe bring in an editor, you know what I mean? And so it's like something has to give. You can't have all the fires burning at once. It's like, could I do my own accounting? Maybe, but all the time it takes, I'm terrible at math, to get that all right would take me away from my relationships with my editors and with my clients. You know what I mean? So there's only so much time you can allocate it to yourself. And I would say a few people, I'm sure in there are going to be outliers, have done it themselves well. But for the majority, like anything, there's going to be a point where it makes sense to bring in help for it.
Yeah, that's good. I really have a good feeling that in the next 5 years there's going to be a boom in delegation because that's
Oh.
where, yeah, because small businesses are. There was like a time where, oh, you have to do this and this and this by yourself, and people kind of got burnt out, and we got burnt out too. Like in the last 5 years, we were just trying to do everything ourselves. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited for the next 5 years because I know that it's going to be.
Absolutely. And I think we're absolutely in a gig economy right now. And so we're seeing, for me, it might be the publicist, or you bring in an accountant like myself. And I have a financial consultant who does all of my number. I mean, she's incredible. Michelle would say to Wedding Pros, quick shout out, because she's one of the best investments I've had for, doing that sort of thing. But there's also the gig. So it's, I just had a design done. I have a great designer, but I needed a freebie design. So I have a person that I use on Fiverr, and I have a transcriber on Fiverr. So I may not have someone on retainer all the time, but I do have, because of this economy where it's so accessible, it's much easier to be able to delegate. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the people who delegate well are the ones who delegate, but then they take that time that they were going to use for that and they put it to good use in their company. You know what I mean? So I tell people, listen, if you can hire someone like us and take that time that you used to spend on real wedding submissions and work on business development to work on improving the client experience, that's how it's going to be worth it, bringing in someone like me.
So I just realized when you said that for us, because we have a big team, we do high volume wedding videos, right? So we
Mhm.
do about 70 to 100 a year,
Wow.
and we we have in-house editors, and we delegated everything. But what we didn't know was what we're gonna do with the extra time that we got. So I
Yes.
really wished we had someone to tell us, like, okay, now this is what you need to do. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. Well, for me, this is what I tell people when I speak. I talk a lot about setting goals, which I know sounds very kumbaya, but I say, listen, you're at point A. you need to get to point B. What has to happen to get there? And if you delegate a publicist, a marketing person, a financial person to help get you there, you really need to think about what are the activities that are going to get me there next. I would love to double the membership of our collective. It's been growing, and there's room for experts to be joining us. And so I brought in a virtual assistant and a new full-time person with the hope that I can get more off my plate, that once I train them, and then I can work in the business on building email lists and email marketing and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we all have to learn from, and how to really make the best use of our time.
Okay. So, well, I want to get this out of the way. This question I asked you earlier. I want to
Yeah.
get this out of the way because I wanted the listeners to have like a number in their head, like what's the typical like average rate for someone to, if they want to get a PR consultant.
Sure. That's always a tough one because there's such a wide range of pricing. I'm very upfront about pricing. You're going to find with me. I will say, so the good news is with us, with our Wedding PR membership, which is the OFD Collective, that's a very unique business model. But we put all our pricing out there, and you're looking at a pretty minimal investment of between like $129 and $229 a month. And that is pretty hands off because really everyone prices themselves differently, but I would imagine most publicists have to bear in mind the labor, the time that goes into it, the intricacies, the complications, the challenges. And so I price that at a very small business friendly price because these guys are not meeting with me regularly. We're not pitching out for them outside of the weddings. So, but when you come to being on retainer, it is going to depend on a few things regionally, the experience of the person, but you could see anywhere from, I'm going to give you a wide range, and forgive me here, but most of them are going to be between 1,500 all the way up to even 7,500. And that doesn't include the tens of thousands of dollar retainers that corporate are paying to publicists. You know what I mean? If we're talking someone who's bringing a lifestyle publicist on retainer, it's going to be, it'd be hard pressed to find someone for under 1,500. And then that would be limited, cost, like a limited hours, I should say. And then it could go upwards towards 5, 6, 7,000. I'm sure there's some outliers on both of those, but people are ready to make a pretty considerable investment when they bring someone in. Because ideally you bring in a publicist who is literally going to be like they're sitting in the office next to you. And so there's a lot of time that goes into that.
Okay. And you're talking about monthly, right? 15?
Monthly, per month. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Whew, man. But
Sure. And it depends. It depends on what their needs are. And if you have someone who is looking to increase their business and they're going to see a direct return on investment and have asked themselves the question, what has to happen in order for this to be a success? Then the cost that goes in, if you have a publicist who is booking you and speaking engagements and you're making that sort of similar rate, then it's going to pay for itself.
Yes, exactly. I was just going to say, like, when you gave me the price, I didn't really back up and say, whoa, that's too much. I immediately thought that, holy crap, this is just going to take us to the next level if ever we do this, because it's you're adding someone to your team that the main purpose of that person is to elevate your company, and that's really exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the hope. And that's why we created the collective too, so that it was more baby steps into PR, where people who said, well, I just want to dip my toes in and yada, yada, yada. That's where it's like, okay, then this sort of investment is a lot easier to swallow. Do $229 a month, and then you're going to get up to 8, submissions a year for your weddings. And you get, we have between 30 and 40 press inquiries every month for these guys to be able to chime in on. And so if they want to take the time to be, get connected to Martha Stewart Weddings and Brides.com, then that pricing model works for them.
Okay, so it's different if I want to feature my wedding, and it's different if I want to feature myself, like me as a brand, right?
That's a great way to put it. That's my world, but everyone's a little bit different with that. We've done over 600 real wedding submissions at this point. I'd love to think we are as well-oiled machine as you're going to find in the industry. So we're able to maximize, people's bang for their buck and get them out the door with relative quickness and with quality. And so everyone's a little bit different, but really, if you're looking for someone to help create this reputation for you, that's always going to cost more.
And I've been reading up on you, and I actually forgot to congratulate you on the
Oh,
award nomination.
what did I do?
But yeah, congratulations on that.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
really nice to see that you're not only trying to elevate other businesses, but you're actually excelling in the industry too.
Well, we're trying.
Yeah.
It's funny. We just came back from this great PRSA, which is Public Relations Society of America, and we came back and we were so excited. We won 3 awards. The whole team came, yada yada. And
Wow.
I think it elevates, like well, first of all, it puts a bounce in your step, right? I mean, it just does. And I think for us, because wedding PR is so different than traditional PR, and there's only about a dozen of us who do it. I'm sure most people scratch their heads, publicists going, what in the world? What do they do? And so it gives us that momentum and hopefully, recognition among our peers that I think every small business owner is looking for, to be honest.
That's right. That's right. I love that. So there's just almost a handful of you, huh? There's not a
There,
lot of.
there are not a lot of us, and we're all very different. I'd like to think I know a few of them. They're all really lovely, and we all have our own focuses. Some people are wedding and lifestyle. I'm one of the few that's very strictly in weddings. Like that's where we live. We're very niched. I would say I'm the only one, as far as I know. So grain of salt, where we also that kind of retainer side is more industry PR. So it's B2B among your peers. And as far as I know, we're literally we're the only PR firm that focuses primarily on that. So I guess it's to anyone out there, there's something to be said for niching yourself, whether you're in PR or videography.
Yeah, the riches are in the niches.
Oh my God, I'm going to put that on a mug.
So, okay, so now that we've talked about that and what the rates are, for those who are wondering, so like for myself, like how would I know when it's time for me to hire a PR firm?
That's a great question. First of all, it's a lot of things you have to be very self-aware about your company, right? Because a lot of us we're either too hard on ourselves, myself included, or we've got those rose-tinted glasses. Yeah, and the other side of it. And so you have to be very honest with yourself and too hard on yourself too. So publicity is at a point where your sales are moving along well. That you're in a good, comfortable spot. You can financially look ahead, either on your own or with the help of someone like a Michelle or something like that, and say, okay, I've got the cash flow coming in. I'm looking at, and I know this isn't sexy, but I'm looking at my metrics. I see that we're booking ahead for 2020, and I'm ready to stand out further from the competition. Some people have had early successes in PR on their own, which is wonderful. And what they're ready to do is take that off their plate so they can recycle or reuse, or excuse me, that's the wrong term. They can just take that time and repurpose it. That's the right word. Repurpose it for something else that will get them from point A to point B. We tend to see this a lot with photographers and planners, although really anybody can benefit from PR. If there's someone who is really, really interested in their Google rankings, so from an SEO standpoint, and they're looking to rank higher on Google search engine optimization, we all know that Google loves backlinks to your site. So like other websites linking back to you. And so for someone looking to really collect a lot of links in that manner too, PR can be great because you're being quoted and you're being linked to. So really at the end of the day, you want them established. You want them to have the expertise, because how in the world can I coordinate? Like, I don't want someone in the collective, if they've only been in it at it a year and can't answer any of the 40 article opportunities we have coming in because they don't know yet. It's just too early. And then likewise, they also usually need the portfolio as well, a great portfolio where they're able to submit it out as well. So if there's someone who's 1 or 2 years in business and it's just at a point where, they're still learning the ropes and they just, it's more inspiration shoots than anything, that's not the right time to bring in a publicist, even if that sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Oh man, that's good to know, because there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that every single year I'm like, I think it's time. I think it's time for me
That's it.
to at least like do a push and you do the brand, and then I get stopped whenever someone asks me a question and I'm like, I don't really know anything about that. So
Mhm.
that's a good thing to know
Well, just
for
something
us.
to keep
Yeah.
in mind. Yeah, because the ones who come in, we've got this great press opportunity right now with a big national wedding site, and it's all about contracts, and it's a what, as a vendor, should people expect to see in your contract? What protects you? What protects them? And then also is kind of an ancillary article on what to do if a couple, like if they're going to cancel their wedding for one reason or another, what to expect. And if people can't come in and answer those questions, and usually you need a few years of experience to see, hopefully you don't have a cancellation right away, you will only benefit from press once you have the expertise to share with people.
Okay. Yeah. That's correct. Because when we encountered something like that, we're like, we don't know what to do. So here's the money. Here's the money back.
Exactly. Oh gosh, I had one year, I used to average about 25 weddings a year at one particular property I was at. And I am not kidding. And I hope this doesn't come out wrong, because I certainly felt terrible for the couples. I had 5 cancellations in a year, 5 out of 25. Like I was touted as the Grim Reaper of wedding. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing or what's happening. Obviously you feel terrible for the couples, but you're like, but you're kind of turning a side eye on yourself saying, I don't know if anyone should book with me anymore, because I had bad luck.
Hey, at least they didn't break up after.
That's what I say.
I know someone who they do the weddings, and then just a lot of the ratio of the breakups and the actual people that stay together are more. So
I know. I should not be dishing, but it's been 15 years. So here we go. We had one couple that they were back and forth on whether they were going to cancel the wedding, and the dad kept calling, God love him. And he was financing it. He and his wife is the mom. And they were basing on when to decide based on, because a lot of venues, what they'll do is they'll buy incrementally make you pay more money depending how close you are to the event. So like maybe you owe 75% if you're 60 days in versus 60% because you're 6 months out. And they kept trying to decide, and they were wavering based on what they owed us. And if I had the ability to do, I would have said, I think this should just break up and not worry about them. Like it sounds like this is on the tail end of not working out. You know what I mean? Like that's a priority sort of thing. So unfortunately it does happen. And so, it's people to have unfortunately gone through that, but that gives you the information to be able to share with writers who are there to educate, future engaged couples.
Yeah. And, having like a really good strategy too can help you. Yeah. So, well, now I want to get into the actual thing that we're going to talk about, which is PR strategy and like how we're gonna handle it. So my first question for you is, what should a company know? What should a wedding creative know when they are trying to craft a PR strategy for themselves?
So there are a few things they want to know ahead of time, and that's a great question because we hear about PR, whether we're listening to a great podcast episode, whether we're hearing someone on stage or they're reading an article, and we just want to go full steam ahead. And I always warn people not to do that. Instead, what they need to do is consider a bunch of things. And some of it I already mentioned. So one of them is goals, of course. Where do you want to see yourself in a year, 5 years? You could do 3 years, 10 years. Statistics show that if you're able to truly visualize kind of what those ambitions and goals and dreams are, you're far more likely to make those goals. And so what does that look like? And where do you see the brand going from there? And then how does PR play a role in it? Like you really want to ask yourself, because I ask this to every prospect who comes in the door, what does PR mean to you? Where do you want to be published? And a lot of people say, I don't know. And I tell them that's a perfectly good answer. But I would suggest they think about that a little bit, because what are the expectations going into it? And my favorite question, again, I'll say it one more time, is what has to happen in order for this to be a success for you and why? I usually tell people, start thinking about maybe 3 spots where ideally you'd like to be featured. What medium makes the most sense for you, whether you're being quoted in something, a real wedding feature. Some people are hot for TV. I will tell you that is not something we specialize in personally. I don't see huge ROI on that based on what a headache TV can be. And so, but it just depends. Podcasts, of course, as well. And you really have to ask yourself what's going to make the most sense. And at the end of the day, it goes down to an incredibly unsexy formula of you've got a message. You want to reach out to this audience. And you said, the niche thing you said, again, I got to get a mug for that, but you really want to focus on what that audience is. And it's not necessarily engaged couples with money. It could be maybe you're doing a ton of South Asian weddings, a lot of Indian weddings, destination weddings, what have you. What is that audience? And basically PR is you want to get that message to that audience with the appropriate media channels, right? So start thinking about all those things. And I would say just being mindful of that message that you want to present to a greater public. So it really goes down, because I wouldn't want anyone to spend any money or time on PR, marketing, advertising, any of that until they have a really solid foundation of where they want to go.
Okay. The when I started the podcast, well, I conceptualized the podcast 2 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And
did you
then
really?
yeah, it took me so long because of imposter syndrome and just I don't know who to ask, what topics am I gonna do, what topics am I gonna talk about? But then I realized the riches are in the niches, so I'm like, wait, I do wedding videos for a living, and I love to talk about business, so I'll
Yeah.
just I'll just concentrate on that, like business for wedding videographers, and then eventually, which is weird because it started to become something else. It became something for other wedding vendors too. So
Mm-hmm.
now I just enjoy talking to business gurus and the experts in the industry. So
Perfect.
yeah.
I think that's wonderful. So you know all about that. And then for me, I'm kind of the opposite, where I was more general based, like wedding PR and marketing, more to wedding PR, and now really focus on wedding industry PR. So it's different for everybody.
So my next question is, since you've been doing this for a few years now, what what has changed, like the media landscape? How has
Mhm.
it changed over the recent years?
It has changed 1,000,000,000% in so many different directions. And so I've been doing this 10 years as OFD. And of course, I had my finger on the pulse of PR before that. But we're seeing a bunch of things. First of all, we're seeing a decline in print. I mean, there is no way around it. Print is still stronger in weddings than it is for the general public, because anyone can see that with all the news articles that come out. But Martha Stewart wedding print closed, but now it's down. Now they've changed it, so it's just once a year. So you've got that, right? And then you've got Brides magazine just got purchased a few weeks ago, and they've quit the print's done for them as well. And so we're seeing that. We are seeing a huge rise in blogs. Like everyone has a blog. There's tons of wedding blogs, for
Really?
better or for worse, right? I mean, there's a lot of great ones out there. We're seeing a huge support and rise of, again, I guess niche is like the word of the day here, but niche bloggers, which it's amazing to see these great regional blogs really do tremendously well, or ones that are focused on, whether it's Jewish weddings, like Smashing the Glass is a great example, or Maharani weddings for Indian weddings. All of those, are doing very well, or seemingly like they're just awesome, and they're direct channels to the right folks. You are seeing a huge change in the media landscape in terms of who's staying and who's leaving. I would say the last 18 months have seen the biggest changes in the wedding media landscape, where Style Me Pretty almost shut down out of no,
Yep.
I mean, seemingly, they say out of nowhere, but the fact is, Abby and Tate Larson sold it for probably a lot of money, we can assume, and they sold it to a huge company. And that huge company, I'm not surprised at some point, even if it was moderately successful, who knows what success is them, the fact that they were closing it down, that was not a huge surprise to me, just based on corporate America, but it did shock most people. And so, of course, now it's back up and running. But the fact is, if those guys could potentially shut down, it really means anybody could. And so that really kind of put us on alert. You've got the Knot and Wedding Wire merger, of course, which I never thought would happen. And here we are in this post-merger world, looking at that, trying to decipher what that all means. And we're also seeing, and this is to your credit as well, the diversification to new mediums. So while print is for more, I don't want to say on their way out, because there's still some really great, strong wedding print out there. So absolutely great for them. The Knot's still out there. Destination I Do magazines is a wonderful one. There's a lot of them. But we're diversifying to other forms of media, including podcasts. I'm seeing a huge, I'm sure you're seeing this too, an increase in the number of podcasts out there. And I think that's one of the best ways to get in front of clients, because you're showcasing your personality, which is what couples want to see. And you're also showcasing your, your portfolio in the sense of your expertise. So it's just like, the last 18 months have been gangbusters, crazy, just, and I'm not surprised by anything anymore. And so I'm always telling people, it's you used to be able to kind of sit back and let things happen, but now you've got to have a hand in it. If you're submitting, you need to know, has a person you're submitting, are they cutting back on the amount of wedding content? Are they splitting to lifestyle art, which a lot of them are doing? Are they showing up less on social media? Are they still in business? Are they pay for play, which is actually, people are very divisive about pay to play editorial. It's not editorial, it's advertorial. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I could go on. We'll have to grab a drink at Wedding MBA and talk about this for like hours. But just in short, it's really put us on hyper alert to the fact that changes happen. And just like anything in entrepreneurism, you've got to stay ahead of the curve and be very aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think you're right. Blogs are coming up, which is weird because they've always been there. But
Now
I think,
everyone has one.
yeah, I think the wedding industry has been sailing along for a few years now because of social media, because of like Instagram. All they have to do is just post their stuff and people comment. But now, just like what Michael Stelzner said, social media examiner, he said the pendulum is shifting to content,
Yes.
and people need to know that it's not just going to be pretty pictures anymore. It's going to be about the blogs.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know if you noticed, but I've been researching on this because I talked about it actually in Rising Tide. And my topic, like with Kylie, was
Mm-hmm.
video marketing.
Yeah.
And I noticed that Facebook is designed to compete with YouTube. So they're saying by 2021, Facebook is going to be all video because that's the push that they're trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where the revenue's at,
Yeah.
and video's the next thing. So, the trend in media for the wedding industry
Mm-hmm.
is just shifting, but it's like a circle. Sometimes it's going to be in the bottom and then it's going to go up, but
Sure.
I think the millennials have a really short attention span, just like me. I'm not a millennial, but I also have a short attention span, but it really depends on what medium you
Really,
put
and
your
what's
stuff
so
into.
fascinating about this is video is not only the next big thing, it is the big thing. It's crazy to me. Like 2 years ago, I was shelling out quite a bit to get a video about OFD consulting. And so like I could see that was where we wanted to go with things. And it's amazing to me now that video is still woefully not accepted in the wedding PR as much world as it should be. You know what I mean? Everyone is still hot for inspiration shoots and real wedding submissions, but very rarely do you see the video component, which is
Yeah.
boggles my mind, where everything else, Facebook Live, Instagram, like TV, all that stuff, video is hot. I mean, and it has been, but we're woefully behind in the media world for weddings, I would say.
So yeah, it's just it's been crazy, like watching the last year, like how everything has evolved and how Instagram changed. The IGTV became, it was vertical and now they do horizontal. They're just concentrating more on video and they're trying to integrate it into Instagram as well. So it's perfect, at least for me, because I do video. So I feel like now
Exactly.
we're in front. So okay, so now I want to ask you, when it comes to PR, what would a typical pitch look like?
So when it comes to PR, pitches can mean a few different things, right? If you're pitching for feature coverage of your company in particular, by all means, that looks different than if you're pitching some article ideas so you can be an expert for it. If you decide to pitch for something about yourself, like maybe you're doing something totally different and what have you, and you want to get it out, whether it's in your local market, it would be an email, and you'd be more focused on yourself as a story. If it's going to be pitching about story article ideas where you could be an expert in them, that's going to be a bit different. And let me kind of walk you through it. Always going to be an email. Media pitches are always emails. Like it's never anything else. I mean, I guess if you know the journalist really well and you text them a lot, like, okay, maybe, or you do like a DM on Twitter or something like that. But for the most part, historically, especially if you've never ever worked with them before, it's going to be email. From there, you're going to have a subject line. I say keep it short but sweet, just story idea, article idea. These guys have 3 to 5 seconds max to see
Yep.
what you're up to, like, and what you want to talk about. And we don't have any more time for that. And so to be able to just go in and do that. And from there, you greet them like you would anyone. I'm a good morning, good afternoon, good evening kind of person myself, but everyone's a little bit different. And then from there, make sure you use their name, which I know sounds obvious, but if you're sending out 3 pitches at once, it's pretty easy to get confused and go, oh shoot, I should have, I called you the wrong name. From there,
That's my fear.
I know. I've done it once. I've done it once a million years ago. It was completely mortifying, but we're all human, and it happens. And one time in 10 years isn't too bad.
Yeah.
From there, it's 3 paragraphs. First paragraph, tell them why you're reaching out. My name is Meghan Neely. I'm with OFT Consulting. I'm reaching out today because I follow your work and I have a story idea that I think could be a fit for your readers. Something, I'm just making that up, but like, boom. Middle paragraph, pitch them what it is. If you're pitching about your company, maybe for an entrepreneurial feature, because they do that sort of thing, give them the highlights. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going into my new storefront. This is why it's different, yada, yada, yada. If you were pitching story ideas, which is a lot of wedding PR, is actually because there's so many evergreen articles out there. Constant churning out of wedding articles where people can be quoted in them. So with that side of it, that second paragraph instead would be maybe 2 to 3 story ideas, to really get people going, just like with those that contract article we were talking about. And maybe why it inspires you. Great example. When my beloved team, anytime any of them are getting married, I hound them for story ideas based on their own lives. And we had one where one of our former employees, Audrey, she was amazing. We were there through her whole wedding planning experience. And she's complaining about her now husband, who's wonderful, Niall, and he was not doing what she thought he should be doing to get ready for the wedding planning and, the wedding and not being as involved. And then she realized he loves spreadsheets and got him involved with like tracking the gifts, yada, yada, yada. And so because we were very inspired by that, we pitched to brides.com like 9 ways to get your groom amped about planning the wedding, and it got picked up, and it was completely due to Audrey's her experience. So you can kind of pull in some of that, and then from there, that last paragraph is all, no matter what you're pitching, it should always be about how you can make it happen for them. These guys are constantly on deadline. They have limited resources. People aren't very reliable getting back to them, so it's always best to be able to get in touch with these guys and tell them, listen, I'm happy to provide my expertise. I have professional images. I have video I can share with you. I also belong to the local NACE, WIPA, ILEA, what have you chapter. And if you want a variety of experts, I can certainly connect you. And then you end it and call it a day. Hope for the best.
Wow. Okay. So your pitch, so I'm writing it down.
I can send you some samples too, so you've got them at the ready.
See, I have it. So your pitch has 3 H's. So your first paragraph is hello. Second paragraph is your highlights, which is your story ideas. And your third paragraph is your how, like how you're going to make it easier.
Yes, look at you. You should come on the road with me, and
I'll do it.
We'll do this together.
Okay, that's cool. This is really helpful for me because whenever I try to contact people for a podcast or, just pitching an article or our videos, having like a structure really helps. This is amazing. This is so easy to understand. 3 H's.
Good. And listen, not everybody is going to say yes to that. And that's okay. I think some of the most savvy wedding pros are the ones who recognize that, they've got thick skin and not everything's going to be a fit, and that's okay. And listen, sometimes those pitches don't land for a bunch of months. We sent one out last September to, I think it was, what was it, Pure Wire or Pop Sugar, like one of the big lifestyle sites. They just wrote back in June on a Friday and said, yeah, we want to run with this and we need everything in 3 hours.
Whoa, and you have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so now I want to ask you for myself this time. I want to be selfish and talk about I want to ask you about for me as a videographer, what is the best way to portray my expertise and industry knowledge without showing the video of my work? Like,
And,
yeah.
and that's a great question because, like I said, one of the biggest challenges I see with videographers, which is why I was so excited to come on here and really dig in with you about, is that real wedding features, there are some exceptions, but many of these sites don't accept the video, which boggles my mind. I mean, I know a lot of it has to do with their own inner workings. I mean, there's a method to the madness here, but it's like, how can I show it otherwise? And so that's why videographers in particular are in a really good position, because there's just, I'm sure you can agree with me here, there's not enough great education out there about wedding videography. I'm sure you've seen the statistic that the number one regret engaged couples, now married couples, have about their wedding planning is that they didn't hire a videographer, which doesn't do you a lot of good on the other side of it. And so to be able to kind of harness that in all the things that you do know and be able to reach out to writers, especially because there's just so much wedding photography content out there. I mean, if you go to weddingwire.com, you go to Martha Stewart Weddings, brides.com, any of those, just type in the word wedding photography and look at all the articles that come up, like best shots, what to do before you contract with them. But there are so few in videography. So if I was a videographer, I would go to some of those major sites. I'd run a search on wedding photography and photography. I would see if there's some similarities in writers. Like maybe some writers always write about wedding photography as part of their beat, if you will, which is their area of expertise, and pitch to them and say, listen, I've seen these great, wedding photography. I'm curious if you're open to any wedding videography related content. Here are 3 ideas that I thought could be a fit.
Oh.
Yeah, like 3 things or whatever, top things you should already have in place before you meet with videographers. Something about videography contracts or timing of videography, because like when the heck should they get there, and things like that. And it's just such I would say that and entertainment are 2 areas that just aren't covered enough.
Okay. Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird because you would think that since video is already like the next phase, these blogs are actually the like Green Wedding Shoes and Style Me Pretty. They're starting to feature our works, so which is
Which is
good. It's good.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Mm-hmm.
what I do when we get featured, like for the past few years, what I do is whenever we get featured, I put the video on Facebook. I upload the video natively on Facebook and say
Mm-hmm.
we got featured, and then put the link to the feature, so
Mm-hmm.
that at least I've gotten like Style Me Pretty, like the post, or at least we have the video in front first before
Mm-hmm.
we do that. But
That's
it
great.
kind of works. But for me, well, I'm gonna talk to you about this, but later. But for me, like getting featured is a little tricky for video, at least, because
Mm-hmm.
the couples that we want are the couples that don't want to get featured. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense? So
Yeah,
it's kind of
it's
like our personality.
no, absolutely. And you've got to be mindful of that, because then PR is not the best route necessarily for you outside of some of those quotes and things like that. And that is hard, especially when you're working with people who they really don't want to share their wedding, or it could be that there's notoriety behind it or things like that, and what have you. I mean, absolutely. So then it's like, well, what are the other methods? It's like, if I was a videographer and I worked with enough people that just it wasn't going to work out, that you could share a lot of their content, there's value in going after PR from the expertise area, but also I'd probably readjust some of my strategies and focus more on relationships and networking, and, making sure I'm staying in the good graces of the venues and the planners, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, that's pretty much how you. So there's this thing. I have a group of friends in the industry
Okay.
that we talked about it like a few years ago, and we kind of have like in the back of our minds that whenever you do a styled shoot, you go for companies that have PR firms,
Mm,
because it's easier for you to get featured. Because they always say that whenever we do styled shoots, and not everyone is a strong addition to the team, the chances of us getting featured is very, very slim. So at least the people who have PR firms, that they're gonna they're gonna give more, because they have a PR firm and they want their PR firm to be like, okay, here's the submission. So at
mm.
least that's what we were thinking of, but I don't know if that's true or not.
You know what I think it comes down to? I think I'd be more apt to say if you're working with people in a styled shoot and someone has representation, because every publicist is going to be different. You know what I mean? Like, and nothing's ever a guarantee. But if you do have a publicist as part of that inspiration shoot, kind of by proxy with one of the wedding pros, what it does is it puts you, like, it prioritizes it. It puts it in the hands of someone who it's their job day to day to get that done versus, and this is human nature, we do a shoot, then it's May and it's really busy and we still need to pull some of the images, you know, and it just becomes on the back burner. But if you hand it to someone like myself or one of my colleagues in the industry, it's what our day to day is, if that makes sense.
That's right. Okay. That makes so much more sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we take advantage of these people because we're friends with them too, but.
Oh, of course. But I think you're smart to do that. I think it's nice, you know, to consider and ask her and think to yourself, well, you know, and I think you bring up a good point. When you're doing inspiration shoots, you have to be very particular about who you bring on, you know, and it's going to have a lot to do with what's their portfolio, what's their turnaround time. Are they easy to work with? Are they professional and polished? And do they say what they're going to do and actually do it? But then also it doesn't hurt to say, well, if they have representation, I encourage you to be careful because really only one person should submit it, but that could be to your advantage. So I wish people were pickier about who they did inspiration shoots with, to be perfectly candid.
Yeah, we just have so much experience with styled shoots that whenever we have a styled shoot that doesn't really meet everyone's expectations or it was very disappointing. I see the other vendors and, you know, some of the vendors spend more than the others and, you know, we spend money. We actually make an invoice to whoever organizes the styled shoots to say that this is how much money it costs. I'm going to do this for free, but this is how much money
value is. Absolutely. I wish more people did that so we were at least all understanding, because there's going to be the cost of your time. There's hard costs with florals and things like that. I mean, there's delivery trucks, all of that. And so I wish and that's why I think it's essential to have a plan for PR, whether you have someone with you for that or someone else moving forward. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how you do it, you've got to have a plan.
Okay. That's cool. Good to know. So my next question is, let's say you pitch some topics to a writer, but they don't respond. What does the follow-up process look like?
I tend to not be too aggressive about it. I may follow up one time. I rarely follow up a second time. And this is when you're doing media pitches, because more than likely they've gotten your email. It hasn't gotten lost. They will be in touch if they want with that. And so I just say if you can follow up with something that's a little bit different, that would be nice, you know, to do. Otherwise, you got to recognize, in the words of Sex and the City, that they're just not that into you. And that's okay, because someone will be down the road. Now, when it comes to real wedding submissions, if you send something out, typically they have a period of time on their submission page where you may hear back, and you're well within your right to follow up until you hear back from them, in my opinion. And if you don't, after multiple attempts, you are well within your right to just, you know, kindly withdraw from it as well.
Oh, you could do that. I didn't know you could do that.
I do that. Well, you have to in this day and age, because it's like some of them go out of business but don't tell you. Or they say, oh gosh, I have stories. But yeah, we've had ones where they've gone out of business, but they're still posting minimally, but they're not taking anything else, but not publicly telling you. There are ones that we just had one that was accepted months ago, like 5 months ago, and it was a published date was in like a week, and they wrote and said, oh, we're going to decline this now because we're splitting weddings and lifestyle. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so you have to stay on top of those guys, because as much as there's a million like really wonderful professional editors that are out there, there's also people who literally have no idea what they're doing. You know what I mean? They're not running it like a business. So you have to be mindful of that. Hopefully you're working mainly with all the good ones, and we love who we're working with.
So, okay. So let's say you already did the process, right? You went through, you submitted, and then it took like 6 months or a year to get featured.
Probably not that long.
But what are you supposed to do once you get published? What's like a good strategy for that?
Your press only lives as long as you allow it to. And so it's really up to you or your publicist, but really you to keep the engine moving. And I think one of the first things we think to do is to move forward and, post on social media, which is great to start. when it comes to that. But then, from there, you've got to expand beyond that. So, boosting the ones that are doing particularly well. If you are featured and you're part of a wedding, making sure that the couple as well as the other creative partners know so that they can all share. So that's part of it. You could, if you have an email newsletter, doing a roundup there or on a blog. I love the wedding companies that are building their email list, which are typically prospects, engaged couples, recently married. And for the really good articles where it's how-tos and stuff, they're shooting out these quickie email blasts with some of the top quotes and sending it these are what we think are the trends for 2019 and 2020, or these are the trends to throw out the window, or whatever, that looks like. If they're on a podcast where they've spoken with you and it's been a good fit for them to share with their audience, you'd want them to send that out as well. I would say a press page is great once you have minimally 3 to 4 great pickups. You get those 3 to 4 great pickups, and then from there to go ahead and have a dedicated press page on your website, and just so people can see them, because now more than ever, engaged couples are researching people like crazy, and so it's important to be able to go and it's important at this point to be able to have the couples come to your site and see that third-party credibility by having all that press.
Okay, cool. Okay, my last question, second to the last question, but what are some tips for building strong relationships with writers for ongoing press opportunities?
I think getting to know them as people, man. Just get to know them. Don't pitch them immediately. Instead, get to know them and follow them on Instagram and read their articles. Take some time to really dig in and look at what their articles are and see what they're all about. And, from there, I'm a big fan of that personally. And then from there, just get to know their content over time and, pitch them a few. Don't be pushy. If you don't hear back, send it another time. I would say sign up for things like Haro as well, which is Help a Reporter Out. It's a free program. Monday through Friday, 3 times a day, you get press leads. Start pitching some of those writers, as the queries make sense. And, just get to know them and treat it like a relationship. I have gotten to know some of the most amazing people in the world because they're writers. I'll give you a good example. I'm going to NACE Experience next week, which is a big conference. And one of my wedding writer friends, who's also a friend, who I jokingly call my internet friend, Carrie, we are having dinner on Monday. It is the first time we've ever met in person, and we've known each other for 3 years probably.
Wow.
And we've just incrementally, she used to work for one of the big bridal publications, and we were sending information back and forth, and then we'd start slipping in these little personal kind of vignettes, and we really get to know each other. We became Facebook friends. So it takes time, and it can turn into these awesome relationships too, for what it's worth.
Okay, that's cool. So yeah, you connect first to the person.
Yes.
Because
get to know them as a human being.
Yes. That's the thing. That's the reason why these networking events work so well. Is because people are craving for human connection now.
Yes.
Because everything's follow, and it's not a real relationship.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more when it comes to that. And so, yeah, I completely agree. I think at the end of the day, we're still in the business of people. Period, and I think it's worth it that we still get to know each other that way. Bearing in mind the media landscape's changed so much that now you're seeing a lot of the world is made up of freelance writers. They are working on their own. They're in coffee shops. They're doing all the stuff we're doing, and there's a camaraderie there. I've really gotten fairly close with some writers who we've never met in person, but you do crave that, and I love the relationships I've made.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my last question is for people who aren't ready to get a PR firm yet. What is the best strategy for them to do to build up to that? Because eventually you're going to want to promote your brand, and you can't really handle everything by yourself, right? So what's the best way to build up to that?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do, I mentioned Help a Reporter Out. Go sign up for that. First and foremost, everyone should sign up for that. Just type in Help a Reporter Out and it'll come up. That's a great way to dip your toes in there. Get to know if you're advertising, which a lot of people are and doing it successfully. Get with the people that you advertise with, and just double check and say, are there any editorial opportunities I need to be aware of to dip your toes in that? You'd have to go, depending on what you do in the industry, Two Bright Lights and Matchology are both really, they're low cost but great investments for submitting weddings. out to blogs and publications. They have amazing tutorials, great ongoing webinars. I'd absolutely look into that as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such an amazing conversation.
Yay.
I love what
Productive.
we
I
talked
feel
about.
like we just got a lot covered.
Is there anything else that you want to say before we?
Oh my gosh, I would say just keep at it for people, and to know that you can get a lot done on your own, which is wonderful. And that, if there's a time and place when you are looking to hire publicity, the very best thing you can do is, have a great understanding of where you want to go. And then when you get with these folks, make sure that their relationships and their strategies are a match for where you'd like to go. That's a huge part of it. I mean, I talk to people about that all the time.
Okay, set your goals and make sure they're smart goals.
Yes. Oh,
Right?
man after my own heart. Yes.
Yes.
Smart goals I talk about that all the time. I love
I
it.
love the one thing I love about smart goals is the realistic part. Like it has to be realistic.
Yeah, real, and I like it. Yeah, attainable, realistic, and attainable.
Yes.
Because I always joke that I don't mean to be a dream crusher, but I end up being a dream crusher because I'm always like, no, it's not a good idea. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. And because you have to, like, if it's too pie in the sky, and I'm all about thinking big. I mean, I absolutely am. But at the end of the day, like, if it's not realistic enough that you're never going to get there, what is the point in putting that goal out there? And maybe that sounds terrible, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah. In the world of rah-rah, someone has to bite the bullet and say, like, yeah, sorry.
I poke holes in things all the time. That's my job. I poke holes in what people are doing.
Yes. And you see what they're special in. You see how special they are, but then you make sure that they're grounded.
That they're grounded. Absolutely. Like and it's okay to go after these big goals. Like I don't want to be a complete dream crusher, but people really need to be mindful of the fact that what's realistic and what's going to happen. If I have a videographer say, I want my videos published everywhere in all the blogs, and I'll say, listen, there's a problem with that because some people don't accept them, and it could just be behind the scenes, the format doesn't work for them. And they're like, well, I'm still going to do it. And it's like, that's not realistic though. Let's find other ways, or let's find you a publicist that's gonna blow smoke. Can be done.
Yeah, I love that there's publicists for this industry, because I could just imagine being a publicist for like a rock star or a movie star, and they do all these crazy things, and you'd probably be, so.
Well, you bring up a good point too, real quick, just to kind of, there is a lot of value in bringing someone in whose niche and understands, if, we have that contract article we're working on, and if you were answering it, right, and you send me your answer, and because I know weddings, I can say, well, I see what you're saying, but can you expand on X, Y, and Z? A journalist probably can't do that in the same way because they haven't been in the wedding industry, more or less, but then someone who's in more generalized or lifestyle PR can't do that either. But on the other side, I mean, I talk to a lot of great people who really want to penetrate their local market. And I've said, you know what, I'm not the best fit for you. And it pains me because there are people I've met, I'm like, I would die to work with them because they're such a delight, but you're just like, it's just not going to work for us. So just know that there's so many different ways to go about it. There's no one right way.
Yeah. Just like any other relationship, there has to be good chemistry and it has to work out still.
Exactly.
So with that, I would love. I thank you so much for.
Thanks for having
obliging me with this. And actually, if you could tell the listeners and the viewers how they could reach you, or if they have any questions.
Absolutely. So best way you can find me is always ofdconsulting.com. Anywhere social, I'm OFD Consulting. I mentioned my membership program a little bit. That's ofdcollective.com as well. And so great way to find me. I foster kittens, so they often show up on my Instagram feed in our office. So keep an eye out for those little buggers. And then I'll be for speaking at Nice Experience, Wedding MBA, Signature CEO, coming up as well. So I'll be at a lot of big conferences. So looking forward to seeing people there as well.
All right. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And Absolutely. You're always so gracious. And whenever you talk to me, and it's so inspirational. And I cannot wait to see you at wherever event we're going to meet at.
Maybe.
Probably Vegas. Yes. So thank you. I really appreciate it. All the best to you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks.